Okay, I want to do a quick update on the 22-foot Continental. As you can see, we have all the bottom frames sealed and painted. There's 2 coats of Smith's penetrating epoxy and then 1 coat of oil-based paint on all the new frames, and then the stringer also, the engine stringer. And now I'm applying, I'm putting down the bottom, the inner ply. I've got this 1 sheet down over on the starboard side, and on the port side I'll just show you how much 5200 I put down. I put a thin layer on all the bottom frames, the rabbet on the keel, and the transom bow. And if you put too much, you have this 5200 it's so thick. If you put too much on there, you're going to have a hard time getting the inner ply to seat against the bottom frame. So you put just enough for it to ooze out a little bit. And I already did this piece on this side, and I'll show you underneath. Got a light here, and you can see the ooze on all the between the bottom frames and the inner ply. So that's what you want to see. So I wanted to show you something about tell you something about the intermediates. Before I put this inner ply on, it was a good time to lay out all the intermediates, which are oak, pieces of white oak. Let me see if I can find the old one. Here's an old one that run between the bottom frames, between every one. And this one here is about 9/16 by, I think, 3/4 or 7/8 wide. I made mine a little bit beefier. But before you put the bottom ply on, it's a good time to lay out where all those go. And if you can read that up on the keel, I've got marks on there. And they're basically centered between the bottom frames. So once the inner ply goes on, then I'll still have those marks. So I laid them out, and what I did was I got a measurement. I numbered them. There's 20 of them for each side. And I got a measurement from the keel down to the chine on each one, and then I took 1.5 inches off of that because you need water to flow between the end of that intermediate and the keel, and then it'll be 3/4 of an inch away from the chine and then the keel. So I've got all those cut. I'll show you over here. There's 20 on each side. And I went ahead and rounded the edges also, just routed them. It didn't take long. So for instance, here's 8 on the port side. So here's 8. So it's going to go under here just like this after the inner ply goes on. So it's better to have these all laid out, cut, and once the inner ply goes on, then we'll put them in. And I'll show you how I do that. So what I'll do is I'll get the inner ply all on, and by the way, it's nailed down with silicon bronze 1-inch ring nails, and that's how you get it to. You want it pressed against those frames so all that 52 oozes out. So I'm just getting ready to put this piece down now, but I figured I'd start the camera and showed you how I got all the lengths for the intermediates. So I'll stop the camera, and once all the inner ply is down and I start putting the intermediates in, I'll start the camera up and show you how we put those in. All right? Okay, I have all the inner ply down and I have all the intermediates laid out. Here's a shot of the front with the strips of 1/4-inch marine plywood. They're screwed down and bedded in 5200 on all the bottom frames. And all the solid lines are frames, and all the dashed lines are the intermediates that I laid out before I put this bottom down. So each one of these, before the bottom was put down, I took measurements and laid out, I went halfway in between each frame, put a mark for the intermediate up at the keel and on the chine, and then I took the distance between those two and took 1.5 inches off of that because I want 3/4 of an inch clearance from the ends of these to the chine and the keel. So now I'm dry fitting them. I have 6 done, and I'll just show you how I do that. So each one of these are a different length, and they correspond to the number that I have on the side here. There's 20 on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and dry fit these, and I'll show you. I made this little gauge block. It's 3/4 by 3/4 by 1.5 inches. And what I do is my first measurement, this chine right here is 1 1/8 inches. So I'll make a pencil mark, 1 1/8 inches. So that's where the inboard edge of that chine is. So I want to be 3/4 from there with this intermediate. So I put my little gauge block there. And what I'm doing is I'm laying out the location of the first screw hole that's going to hold this down. Here's one that's already done. And here's some marks. These are the ends of the intermediates, these pencil marks here. And the first screw is 1.5 inches off of that. So that way I can get a screw, when I'm putting my planks down, I can put a screw near the end, you know, about 3/4 of an inch from the end. And it's good to know where this is so you don't put a screw too close to the end and split that intermediate. So right now I'm laying out the location for the first screw hole, so it's 1.5 inches in. I'll go ahead and countersink, drill and countersink that with a number 8 countersink. I'm using number 8 by 3/4 silicon bronze flatheads. So these are all marked with a stamp. This is a 7S. So I'll put that mark up. That mark will, that way when I go to put these in, I'll know that this goes inboard. It's stamped. So I'll take this gauge block, put it against the inboard edge of the chine, and then I'll take a pencil mark and just make a mark on the inside edge. And then I have a drill bit. You got to pick the correct size drill bit. If you pick one that's too small, these screws will be too tight and you might snap them off. Oak is real hard, white oak, so you've got to pick the right one. So this is, I think, a little over 1/8. So I got a piece of tape on here just so I don't go through the other side. And what I've been doing is I take this little countersink and I just countersink chamfer the top of that. It just makes it a little easier to find that with an ice pick. So now that I got that first hole, it's located. I'll put it under there. Oh, first I gotta do one thing first. I'll take my pencil. I'll line that hole up, and then I'll make a mark. So now I know exactly where this is going to be under this inner ply. And that's when I make my little arrow showing. And then I'll come back here. That's where the other screw hole is going to be. And then you just pick right in the middle. You put one more. Okay, so now all 3 are there. Now I put one in the middle because this inner ply, it's got an arc to it, and if you just pin the end, especially up front where it's more defined, you need a screw to draw that in, and because I'm going to have 5200 on here, so you're going to need that screw to draw that in and squeeze that 5200 out. So I've got my 3 screw holes in there now. I'll use an ice pick to locate that first one, and I'll just tack it in. I won't tighten it up. Now you make a pencil mark on the other 2, and you just kind of swing it back and forth. It doesn't have to be centered because you're going to center it with your drill bit. You just have to know the location in and out. So there's my pencil mark. So you just eyeball it. You put it right in the middle. Then chamfer it again. So now that's all ready to go. So I'll locate that first hole again. Sink this screw in. I won't tighten it up all the way until I put the other two in. And I'll usually put this top one in. I'll swing the plank over and then hit it and then pull the ice pick up and then find the hole. Sink that one. Make sure the hole lines up here, which it does. Now I can sink this one. So that's in place, it's dry fit. So I'm gonna leave that in. In the past, I've taken them out. So you can see it up there. I've taken them out right now, and then when we go to put them in, you put 5200 on this, but what it does is it covers up your screw holes, and then there's gonna be a guy under the boat. I'll put a bead of 5200 on here, I'll hand it to him, and then we've got to use these ice picks to find that hole, and sometimes it's hard to find it. It's a real pain, and then this has got 5200 on it, and then you start getting it all over. So with this time, I think I'm going to dry fit them, leave them in. I'm going to go under there, I'm going to take a piece of tape and just put a piece of blue tape at each end, locate it with maybe a pencil mark, and then take all these out. That way, when I put the bead of 52 on here and hand it to Dan under there, he's gonna know exactly where to put these ends. He's gonna have a tape mark with 2 lines on each side, so he's gonna locate it, and then I could take my ice pick, make sure the screw's there, and then sink these screws so there's no finding that. I mean, it's not gonna be hard to locate it. There's gonna be marks there. So I'll go through and dry fit all of these like I've been doing, get those tape marks, and then I'll start the camera back up when they're all in, and I'll show you a shot of them all installed for good with the 5200 oozing out the sides. All right? Okay, I want to start the camera back up and show how we put one of these intermediates in. I had all the intermediates dry fit. Dan marked them so he knows exactly where they go. And now we're putting them back in one at a time. And we're on number 10 port. And here's what it looks like with the 5200 on it. And it should ooze out all the edges. So I put it under the stringer here, and then Dan takes it and he puts it on his marks. I'll screw first, he'll tell me when.
Go ahead.
I'll just tack it in loosely, and then I'm going to go to this inboard screw.
Go ahead.
Now that those are in, I'll put that center one in. I use a hand driver to usually tighten these screws. Now, you notice the ooze probably isn't all the way down that line. We got to kind of work that in with a little pressure. This 5200 is so thick. I've got this little stick and I can put pressure against. There it is. It's already there. Okay. So you see that nice line of 52 all the way down. All the 52s oozed out. So that one's done. All right. Okay, I wanted to start the camera up and show you all the intermediates are in, and I wanted to get under the boat and just show a shot of them all in. You can see the 5200 that's oozed out from actually all the frames and the intermediates and from the chine. And then here's a close-up shot of the keel with the limber holes on the side and the top of the keel, let water flow through. The bilge. I made them a little bit larger than the original ones. So here's a shot down the bottom, and you can see all the painted surface and then the 5200. So we're gonna, once we get this boat flipped right side up, we'll go through and just touch up all the paint, and we'll hit all the white 5200 with bottom paint or with bilge paint. So there's a couple things I wanted to mention I didn't talk about. When I cut all these intermediates, it's kind of important to know which way the grain's running. I have all the growth rings across this way, across the width of it. So when you put the screw in, from the outside in, you're going across those growth rings. If you had it stacked the other way, they'd kind of act as wedges. It might work, but if you didn't have them pre-drilled just right, it would just be like a line of wedges right down the length of the intermediate, and they'll just split it. So when you can do it, it's good to cut them so the screw goes across those growth rings. And then the other thing what I wanted to mention was the purpose of these intermediates, and that's just to get another line of screws in between the frames just to hold the bottom planks down. So I didn't mention that in the first part of the video. So there it is. So that'll complete the video on installing intermediates.